good?
I'm good.
Your board good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Councilman, you good? You good? John, we good? All right. So the time is 6:30 p.m. and I call this special joint meeting of the Red Oak City Council, the Red Oak Parks and Recreation Commission, the Red Oak Planning and Zoning Commission, and the City Council to order. The time is 6:30. For City Council, we have a quorum. We have all members present. And notice it's been duly posted in accordance to Texas Government Code Section 551. You want to do your...
Yeah, Derek, if you just want to, you're going to open the P&Z and just declare that there's a quorum here.
Okay. All right. Now open Planning and Zoning Commission. We do have a quorum here today. We have myself, Derek Parks, Leroy Kleiss, Ms. Karen Stanfield, and James McClain.
Yep.
I'm Jenny Lindsay, and I declare that the Park and Recreation Department does have a quorum present. Myself, Joanne Smith, Maria Dowding, and our leader, Tom Kelly.
Okay. Okay, and we are here to hear and consider adoption of the Red Oak 2022 Comprehensive Plan and Parks, Recreation, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan. So, want to lead us, take us over?
I will.
Sure.
Thank you very much. My name is Wendy Bonneau with Freese and Nichols, principal with our firm, and have been overseeing this project. Got a few folks with me today. Chris System is here, landscape architect and planner that has been working on the plan. He will be taking any notes. So if I'm not writing, it's because he's typing for me. We also have two people on Zoom that will be presenting. Gail Ferry Catalinas, who is a landscape architect and helped put together our parks component and has worked really close with Kyle and the Parks Board for the Parks chapter. And then we also have Brian Crooks from our transportation group, and he will be presenting the transportation piece of this. So I'll flip the slides, and if y'all have any questions, feel free to stop me as we are presenting, but I do thank everybody for coming. If there's any Cowboy fans in the room, I realize we're on a Monday night. I know we're on a Monday night game, so hopefully we'll get you home by halftime or something, but know this is an important meeting, so do appreciate everybody's time. All of you should have a copy of the full report in front of you. I think we brought plenty of copies. We brought extras of the parks plan itself. The way that this overall comp plan and parks plan is put together, sometimes those are done as two separate plans. In this case, we have put those together. The parks chapter of this is a fully functioning parks report that can be submitted to Texas Parks and Wildlife for grant. So we've done that in a way that it can be pulled out of this. But you all have this in front of you. I'm going to flip through some of the different chapters. I know it's a lot to take in, but I will tell you just a little bit about the overall formatting of this. Each of these sections, there's a chapter that divides into the different sections. There is an appendix in the back that's got a little bit more detail on a few sections. And then page 35 is, I know, one of the things that we'll probably spend the most time on is the future land use plan. I know that's sometimes hard to read on the presentation, so you do have that on page 35 if anybody wants to look at that. So with that, I will get started with our presentation. So
as we go, and we have areas of concern, do you want them brought up at that point? What do you want, like omissions or errors that we blatantly
Let's
know?
go ahead and get through the entire presentation, but as I'm presenting, if there are any comments or any questions or anything that you want to know, then we'll have that towards the end.
Okay.
So, thank you. And I will say, what you have in front of you is about a 99% draft. You'll notice we've left the adoption date off. That is what we're hoping for tonight, is to adopt this plan, and in which case we will change that in print final, but certainly wanted to see if there was any other particular things that came up tonight. We'll get those changes made, but we are at a point, and it will be our last meeting, so. So just overall, I'll go through our schedule and what we've done over the last year and a half, and then I am gonna go through a quick summary of each of the chapters, and so the way that this presentation is set up, it is set up by the chapters of the plan. So overall, this is kind of where we've been over the last year and a half. We started this process in January of 2021. We have had a CPAC meeting, a comprehensive plan advisory committee that we have met with throughout the process. So there's been different folks from council, from parks, citizens that have been involved in that, and so they've given us really good guidance throughout this plan. We've met with them several times. We did a survey when we first started this project. We also did a park survey where we got a lot of information from that that's kind of taken us through. We did a workshop with the staff in economic development, and then we submitted or presented the final draft to the Comprehensive Planning Committee a month or two ago. And so again, this is the culmination of what you're going to see from that. So overall, the first chapter in this is just talking about our Red Oak vision. And this chapter, this entire plan is building off of what you did in 2010. So I put up here just a vision from what we had in 2010. We went through a series of exercises looking at what does Red Oak look like, what is the future, what are some of our strengths and our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats. Top 5 desires for Red Oak were additional parks, public amenities, and some of the community events, sit-down restaurants and entertainment options, increase, which is community pride and things that we can do as a city together, increased employment opportunities, and more sidewalks and trails. So we talked about a few, some of the words that describe Red Oak. And again, you see up here on this slide, just some of the things that we saw as strengths, weaknesses that we wanted to try to make sure that we're making sure that those improvements and those actions are in the plan. Some of the opportunities for more jobs and taking advantage of some of the things that have changed and that we're doing, and then some of the threats to make sure that we're taking these things into account in terms of making sure we have a unified vision. So I won't go through all the details, but some of the things that we agreed with and going through the exercises is wanting to attract more business, wanting to have more neighborhood services, safety, and creating a sense of place. And so in the 2022 plan, what you have in front of you, there are a few things that we added to that vision statement. Overall, felt like it was still a good vision statement, but there are some things we wanted to add. So you see up there our overall vision statement. The things that are underlined are the things that were added. So looking not just at Ellis County, but looking at being a community that's a gateway to the entire DFW area, that we remain fiscally responsible, that our high-quality schools and parks are the foundation of quality of life, and that our goal is to grow as an innovative, business-friendly destination community. So when we first started this exercise, we refined what that vision was, and then we set in place some community guiding principles. So there are guiding principles throughout. I'll go through those in just a second, but then all of our action items rolled up to try to meet those guiding principles. And then out of those actions, we've got an implementation plan. So in the back of each chapter, you'll see actions, and then you'll also see those rolled up in the implementation plan towards the back. So that really becomes the thing that I know that you all as decision makers are looking for in terms of future things to fund and bonds or capital improvements. Those are all rolled up within those action plans. And so just a few of those guiding principles to be family-oriented and really create the destination here, to be business-friendly, to be proactive and fiscally responsible. We want to be a proud and connected community and seeking interaction from our citizens. That we're meeting a multi-generational. We looked a lot at demographics and who Red Oak is serving, and so that we're a multi-generational community. That it is a vibrant city, that you've got yourself defined from the rest of the communities that you surround yourself with, and that we look for innovative opportunities. So the second chapter, and probably the most important chapter in here, is your future land use. That really helps to pick where we're going to grow. So for some context, this is our 2010 future land use plan. The black outline is your city limits at that time. Red Oak is a little bit unique in that there's areas that are defined for future land use that are pretty typical that all cities look at in terms of residential, commercial, industrial areas. But you've also developed over the years planning areas that give you some opportunity to be able to define some criteria within those planning areas, but yet keep it flexible for the good things that come along. So this is some of the things that we looked at in 2010. This is that future land use map today. The lighter black line that still just defines your city limits, and so you'll see we've got everything defined out to all of our ETJ. And then we've got a few areas that are highlighted in this bold black area that I wanted just to touch on a little bit. This one up here in the top right, this blue area, that was a change, and that was something we looked at because this purple line, which you'll hear this in just a minute when Brian goes through the transportation plan, this is the current proposed alignment of Loop 9. So we know that that's going to have a big effect on Red Oak and what changes in. So that was one of the significant changes. Some of this area right in here, this hot pink, along 342. I mean, we've changed this a little bit to map some of the current developments going on. And then there were some changes in this, if you look and compare the plans. Generally, it still remains a residential area, but we were careful to also look at some of the industrial uses and data centers and some of the opportunities you have with that, and then also recognizing that there's some challenges with water service down in this area, and so this plan takes into account that. So again, there's a lot of colors on these maps, but those planning areas are defined loosely. They're more defined than just painting a broad brush picture, but they still remain flexible for things that come along and change that. And then also overlaid on this map are the transportation sections. So this describes each of those planning areas and what are the preferred developments that we have within that. So some of this area did tweak a little bit, just in terms of, again, we would have never known that some of the, innovation in data centers and things like that, 10 years ago were going to be as important today, and some of the big manufacturing things that we're getting. So we wanted to make sure we take into account some of those opportunities where mixed use is appropriate and where it's not. So this area describes each of those planning areas, and then the map before that relates to what those uses, desired uses are.
When, if I could real quick, talk a little bit about the planning area 9.
Sure.
Really what that area is kind of an opportunity type zoning. It's kind of out in the future because there is no infrastructure out there. And it's kind of one of those things where you don't want to say you can't do anything, but you don't know what's going to be coming. IDC is working on some different sewer concepts for out east and so forth, so that may give us more opportunity moving forward before this comprehensive plan is amended in 8 or 10 years or whatever, that we still have the ability to take advantage of whatever opportunities come out there. As it stands today, you're probably just going to get residential because you're going to be on septics and rocket water. But as some of this infrastructure begins to hopefully come in, then that is a large area that would allow us the opportunity to do other types of development if and when that is available.
Good point. Thank you for clarifying. And yes, if y'all have any clarification things that you want to make, feel free to go ahead and jump in. One thing I did want to point out, I'm glad you backed me up, Todd, because planning area 7, if you really like colors and you want to dive into the details and you look and go, wait, planning area 7 on this, but it's not on the map, that's intentional. There is a future land use designation. So we've reserved it, it's not on the map. And that is for something that comes along that may not be, it may be something that's, spectacular that we don't even envision today, that we want to make sure it gets on there. So there is a category that is left open for that purpose.
Is it possible for me to have one of those big books?
Of course. Yeah, there's something, here. There's nobody sitting here to do extra, and we've also got more in the box.
Does anybody else want a big one, or?
Everybody got one? Thank you. Okay, so I mentioned just the planning areas, and again, I would go through all these, and I'm happy to go back and go through any detail, but I also don't want to keep you here all night to go through
Page
all
34 or so.
pages. Yeah, 34 is that land use plan. So in each of those land use categories, we did want to put some definitions for explanation so that when you see those types of things, to define what those are. So within our residential categories, we've got a ranch estate category, which is that 1 acre dwelling unit or lot sizes over 1 acre. And some of our rural areas, probably mostly in the eastern areas of the city. And some of those that, like Todd said, might be on septic as they come along, as they come down in that southeast area. We then have low density residential as a category. This development of about 4 dwelling units or less, and so this is just an example of what would fit probably into that category. So we talk about each of these categories, and they're explained in those following pages after page 35. We have a medium density category. You can see some examples of kind of row homes, townhomes, where those types of houses that would be appropriate within that category. We have a high density category. This is where we kind of flip over and look at houses that exceed 11 dwelling units. And we've got some criteria for those and what that would look like. And then we have a mixed use category, and that is where you truly see a mix of uses, be it residential and commercial. You see different types of examples of that within these photos here. And then within our non-residential categories, you've got retail categories, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. from different types of retail, restaurant type and environments that would fit within that. We have our commercial category, which is more your bigger restaurant, office, and strip center type development. We have an industrial category, for manufacturing, assembly, data storage, warehouses. And then we have an office category, for medical, real estate, and other professional services. And then we have a public and semi-public category, which is gonna be a lot of your schools, your hospitals, your churches, those types of uses. And then we have an Old Town overlay, that is primarily a mixed use, but that's working primarily within your Old Town and within the downtown area. And so overall, this page here that follows the land use chapter will go through specific actions related to land use. And again, without reading every one of these, some of the key things are looking at choices, making sure that we have diverse neighborhoods, looking at the areas within the ETJ. And each of those recommendations that you see on that page then tie back to what one of those, or at least one or more of those guiding principles that are within the plan.
And really quick again, let me point out, I know council is aware, and P&Z probably too, Parks doesn't deal with zoning much, and for some of the staff of public. So a lot of these planning areas, the uses overlap within a planning area. So what that means is you can't just say, okay, I'm in planning area 5, so I just want to put residential in this whole big planning area 5. That's not exactly how it works, because then you bring it back down and do a PD. So then P&Z and council get to look at it and say, okay, well, you can do that in this planning area, but the place within the planning area that you're proposing may not be the most appropriate area for that. So PA 5 may have frontage on Oval Road or 2377. Retail is probably more appropriate along the frontage, but then the residential or so forth could be behind that, or industrial behind that. So just make sure everybody is aware of how that works.
Okay. Any questions before I move on to the thoroughfare plan? And I'll let Brian, can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine, thank you.
Okay, very good. I am on the transportation slide, so I'll let you go through these next couple slides and just tell me when to advance.
All right, thank you very much, Wendy. So the thoroughfare plan was developed in coordination with the city staff. This was an iterative process that built off existing plans. One of the first things that we did look at was travel behavior within the city. And we looked at things like commuting times. And what we're seeing here is that generally speaking, we're seeing pretty good commuting times. We have a big block that's kind of under 30 minutes. And then we have another block that's around 60 to 90 minutes, but that is a small percentage of the overall commuting population. In terms of transportation to work, we're seeing that the vast majority of people are driving. One thing that I would like to draw your attention to is that we're seeing an increase in people doing remote work, working from home. We're seeing this in cities throughout Texas, so this is not an uncommon trend. There's a great advantage to that because it does remove a lot of vehicle trips from your roadways, commuting trips. In terms of zero vehicle households, we're seeing that almost every household has at least one vehicle or has access to a vehicle. Wendy, can I get the next slide, please? In terms of level of service congestion, what we're seeing here in 2018, we're not seeing a whole lot of congestion, a little bit on FM 664. And then by 2045, we're seeing a lot more congestion on SH 342, the Interstate 35, as well as that should be FM 983 and some other roads. We're seeing, if you look above on the vehicle hours of congestion delay, what we're seeing really here is the majority of this congestion is happening along the freeways and a little bit on principal arterials. The good news is that a lot of this congestion is happening on the TxDOT on-system roadway network in terms of funding. The bad news is that most of it is happening on the TxDOT on-system roadway network, in that they're responsible for improving that. So we're kind of reliant on them to coordinate with us for any improvements. Can I get the next slide, please, Wendy? When you look at the thoroughfare plan, there are several key concepts that are important. One thing is that this is a policy document. It provides a framework for growth for decision makers. It's a living document. It can be updated as regularly as you want. It is long range in scope, at least 20 years in the future. Right-of-way preservation is a primary focus in terms of accommodating growth, traffic growth, and the deliverables are usually a thoroughfare plan map and roadway design guidelines. Next slide, please. In terms of the changes from the previous plan, one of the biggest changes is Loop 9. As you can see, we have connections to the proposed grade separations that TxDOT has to the north. We're also seeing a revised greenway network. We're seeing some collector network updates. In the eastern, we're not seeing very many changes at all. No changes really to the eastern thoroughfare plans. And then we see the extension of Old Road across to 35. Next slide, please, Wendy. And then when we looked at the right-of-ways, what we're seeing here is we're seeing some changes to the regional arterials, but in either going back to the 07 design standards for right-of-way. The biggest change probably is the classification of the local roadways. The suburban legacy right-of-way is existing right-of-ways where there's really not any additional, we can't really expand the right-of-way. So we wanted to create its own class. And then we also have rural right-of-ways, which has open ditch drainage. And if we go to the next slide, we can show you various examples of all the arterials, what they would potentially look like. The biggest issue here is that we want to make sure that there is enough right-of-way spacing for the lanes. We want to have good medians to keep traffic separate when they're at high speeds. We want to make sure there's adequate buffers between the travelways and the sidewalks, as well as leaving some green space for trees where we can. Next slide, please. And then again, here's the examples of the local roadways and minor collectors. Again, we do have some of these local roadways are much skinnier because of available right-of-way. Next slide, please. So summary, what are the kind of the most important things? Well, one thing we have to do is regularly update the plan, that as new projects, whether they're within the city or they're external like Loop 9, that the plan is revised to take advantage of these changes. Again, we see the importance with this rise of remote work about how important it is to review emerging technologies and see how we can apply them to the city. We also want to make sure that we apply these thoroughfare design standards to our zone, to our ordinances and other plans to make sure that we ensure a continuity and connectivity. And then we want to participate in the regional planning efforts through COG and the state to make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunities, if it's funding or if it's coordinating with other agencies on new programs, so that we get the best value for our transportation dollar. One thing that I should have mentioned is that one of the things in the plan was to extend FM 2377 across IH35. That's another, we need to have another east-west connection. Wendy, can you go back up a couple of slides to the thoroughfare plan real quick? There we go. So if you look at FM 2377, we want to extend that all the way across SH342 and IH35, just to get that additional east-west connection, because we're concerned that FM 664 in the future, long-term, we're going to need another east-west connection. Okay, we can go, Wendy, can you take me all the way back? Okay. And then again, to construct the Greenway corridor is one of our final recommendations. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, or are we waiting till the end, Wendy?
We'll wait till the end, I guess.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
What's the score? Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Okay, the next section is the Parks and Recreation and Open Space section, and so I'm going to let Gail present that.
All right, thanks, Wendy. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. So let's start off with looking at the Parks and Recreation. So on the next slide, as Wendy mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, sometimes Parks, Recreation, and Open Space master plans are a completely separate planning process. In this situation, we've kind of done them parallel and included it as a chapter of the comp plan, but it is its own document as well. So throughout this planning process, we looked at the existing conditions, looking at all of your existing parks, communicated and heard some input from your community, the stakeholders, and advisory committee in order to develop a vision and goals. We did a needs assessment, which I'll tell you about in a moment, in order to identify the recommendations and priorities. The next step, once the plan is adopted, we will submit it to Texas Parks and Wildlife on your behalf. Once it is approved, it goes in their system for 5 years as an approved plan. So what that means, if the city pursues a grant opportunity with Texas Parks and Wildlife, having this plan doesn't guarantee that you will get that grant, but it does give you additional points in your application that you have a plan that is considered current. It does need to be updated every 5 years in order to be considered current. Next slide. So throughout the parks plan, we looked at your entire park system. That's over 155 acres of parkland. You've got 11 parks, largely focused on the western half of the community, and you have 1 recreation center, which is your senior center. Next slide. The needs assessment was a 3-pronged analysis. So we had a demand-based assessment. That's where we looked at all of the input that we received from the community to determine from their standpoint what are the parks and recreation needs. Standards-based looks at the quantity and location of parkland in terms of acreage, in terms of the size and the types of parks and the areas that they are serving, and then the amount of amenities. So like the amount of playgrounds and basketball courts, for example. And then the resource-based assessment looks at your natural and man-made resources to see what might be able to be further leveraged for recreational benefit. So I'm going to present just a few highlights from it on the next slide. One of the things that I like to bring to the forefront is what we heard from you all. Some people in the room were some of the stakeholders that we talked to at the beginning of the process, and then working with our committee throughout the process. Some of the key desires that came up were expanding the trail network, developing some indoor recreation options at a recreation center, for example, a skate park, having outdoor spaces for events, maybe some space for food trucks, and access to Wi-Fi, for example, in the parks. In terms of issues and concerns, some of the biggest things we heard were really just that not everybody knows what is out there, what the options are, or where the parks are. And then on the next slide, I think is a very telling survey response. So we had close to 300 survey responses, and when we asked community if they could only do one thing to your parks and recreation system, what would they do? It was adding trails, providing opportunities for kids and teens to have additional recreation options, and then in general, just kind of adding. So there wasn't a huge amount of concern about what was there now. It was a desire for more. Next slide. So in order to summarize that 3-pronged needs assessment for brevity today, in terms of parkland acreage and development, having additional what we call close to home parks. So these are the parks that are geared towards Red Oak residents, parks that people can walk, bike, or drive to easily. And especially in the eastern portion of the city, as that area develops, you will need to have parkland developing comparably. In terms of parkland access and connectivity, making sure that there are additional parks that people can walk and bike to. So that means it's going to be within a quarter to a half mile of where people live. That's typically about a 5 to 10 mile walk, and that's often the furthest that people will walk to a park. And then looking at additional sidewalks and trails to help people access those parks and just circulate around the city. In terms of the types of facilities that are most needed, Trails, once again, comes up. It came up in pretty much every conversation. Basketball courts, although I know that you've recently developed another one. Some additional practice facilities for athletics, the recreation center, skate park, dog park, things like that. And then in terms of recreation, sort of across the board, just some more options for children, youth, adults, seniors, having indoor and outdoor options. And your community really enjoys the family-friendly or family-oriented events. So having some additional ones throughout the year would be appreciated. Next slide. So the city already had the vision statement that's on the screen. Frankly, I thought it was perfect. I thought it did an excellent job capturing what we heard from the committee and the greater community. So we left it as is. And on the next slide, you'll see the guiding principles that we developed to support that vision and kind of form the framework for the recommendations. So looking at making sure that we're acquiring and preserving parkland today so that it is preserved into the future, making sure your park system responds to what your community wants in the park system, having options for all ages, abilities, and interests, making sure that those areas are safe, well-maintained, and accessible, and then looking at a variety of partnership and funding strategies as the city continues to improve the park system. Next slide. The recommendations are kind of quickly summarized here. So in terms of acquiring and preserving parkland, we have identified target parkland acquisition areas, which I will show you in a moment. And then we recommend reviewing your parkland dedication ordinance and policies just to make sure that they are adequately meeting the city's needs as you continue to develop and grow. Looking at responding to what your community wants to see in the park system, we have identified park-specific recommendations for each park, as well as some target trail corridors. You'll see those in a moment. And then in terms of some standalone facilities, which could be located in a variety of different areas, are the rec center, skate park, all abilities playground, dog park. We did have recommendations in here for increasing shade in the park system. That is crucial, especially here in Texas. If you want people to enjoy the parks, they are going to need shade. And then having that availability of Wi-Fi and technology in the park system. One comment we received from the committee at our final presentation to them was looking for additional water bodies in the community for recreational benefit. So we have added a recommendation that those be encouraged as development occurs. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it will be important to maintain an updated parks plan in terms of what Texas Parks and Wildlife considers updated. So that's every 5 years, and that can be done in-house by city staff or by a consultant. On the next slide, you'll see the target parkland acquisition areas. The one thing I want to point out here is it's a very large area, and that is based on the fact that most of your parks are focused in just a few areas. So residents who live within those highlighted red areas are not able to easily walk or bike to a nearby park. As this area develops, it's important to consider that really only the residential developments and residential areas within these parts of the city need close access to parks. On the next slide, you'll see the target trail corridors or potential trail corridors. We've identified areas for both on-street and off-street connectivity. So on-street would be some of the facilities you saw in those street sections earlier, and then off-street would be more of trail along the creeks or through the floodplains, for example. Some of these segments do include existing sidewalks that can be leveraged to help connect the whole system. Some will require coordination with private landowners. And as you're thinking about prioritization of the trail system, the more that you can prioritize trails that are within that half mile of where people are living, the more people will be able to walk out their door and get onto the trails and ideally into the parks from there. And then on the next slide, we have the remainder of the parks recommendations. So in terms of recreational programming, we do recommend a recreational programming assessment, which is basically looking at all of the recreational programming that is offered to your community today through other organizations, and then identifying some gaps and areas where the city can come in and help to support or provide programming for children, youth, adults, and seniors. Having additional community events in other parks throughout the city can help people get more familiar with what is available. And then also having a Parks and Rec website, which is updated with, park maps, where are things located, what is available in terms of programming or events, so that if people want to know what's going on, they can find it easily on the website. In terms of safety, maintenance, and accessibility, it's going to be really important to make sure that the amount of staffing and parks funding is appropriate for the level of parkland that you have. So you already have a substantial amount of parkland, and as that grows over time, you want to make sure you have additional staffing and funding to make sure that those parks remain well maintained. Oftentimes, a poorly maintained park is actually seen as almost worse than no park at all. So you want to make sure that you're budgeting for that. Having consistent park signage and park design guidelines can help people get a better understanding just by looking at it of what is a city park. We want to make sure that any ADA accessibility issues are addressed on a prioritized basis, having appropriate storage for your maintenance equipment, and maybe looking at some additional irrigation areas. And then lastly, your partnerships and funding, really looking everywhere is what it comes down to. So looking at potential interlocal agreements with the ISD, looking for grant funding, public-private partnership opportunities, and then bond funding for capital improvements. I believe that is the end of the parks.
Yes, thank you very much. So moving on to the next chapter in your report is the community enhancement. These are all those things that differentiate you, as a city that make this be a place that you want to live. In 2010, we called that livability, and I'm pointing out some of these differences because sometimes it's often asked, what changed from before. So we called that livability, and we were really focusing on neighborhood livability and enhancing the image as a whole in terms of branding and identity and gateway and quality aesthetics. So that's what we talked about in this plan. We changed that to community enhancement because it is about livability, and there's still those same top things that we want to preserve. Our current neighborhoods, but then we also want to create better places and thinking about our residential landscape and the way some of our, beautification things are done, but then also just looking at livability from what's trending in some of the, what they call missing middle housing, where you've got your traditional rural development or your traditional single-family homes, and, for a long time we thought of traditional single-family homes and apartments, so there's not much in between. There's a whole lot in between, and we're seeing a lot more of those types of products that haven't completely made it here, or I think that there's opportunity for a lot more of. And so that's something that we've addressed in this, being able to bridge that gap of those different types of housing within Red Oak. So this slide, and again, the last page of that chapter just talks about some of the key recommendations within the plan. I know one of the things that we talked a lot about is building materials, how do we get things up to different standards, how do we look at incentivizing those types of things as businesses come in. I do think that that's one of the interesting things that Red Oak does from your planning areas. It does give you flexibility. Some cities don't like that. They want to be pretty rigid in their development and the way that things are done. And sometimes that can be a good thing. I think you all have maintained some flexibility just generally, and that's what those planning areas help define, so that you're able to work with developments that come forward to work with them to increase standards, to work with them to do good landscaping, to do good materials, to do those types of things that we want to see in the plan. The next chapter is economic development. We touched on this lightly because there was some things already set in place, but we did define overall set of chapter goals, looking at policy from economic strategy to diversify your city's economy, position Red Oak to be a premier destination in southern Dallas and Ellis County, to support the growth and the innovative tools that you have in place between your EDC and your IDC, and just creating a vision that aligns those things together. So Jason Claunch with Catalyst was already working for the city and teaming partner that we work with quite a bit. So he had conducted a market analysis, and so we married up and talked to him about what he was doing and as it pertained to Red Oak, and he had already done a trade area study. So we worked with the EDC and the IDC early on in the process to look again and just kind of what are some of our strengths and weaknesses, and then coming up with some overarching economic development strategies to maintain our business recruitment, looking at all the networking capabilities we have, really leading on the development, going out and pursuing those things that you want to see, and then at the same time fostering small business growth and entrepreneurship. And then we've always thought that there's a real opportunity within your downtown area and kind of central Red Oak, that innovation and cultural hub. We still think that there's opportunity to expand on that. So these are some of the action items that are included within that chapter of the economic piece. And then the very last chapter in the report is the implementation plan. Mainly what that does is that summarizes all of the actions within the plan in one overall chapter. Takes all the input that we heard, put that in a comprehensive plan, and then within that chapter at the end, we talk about capital improvements, we talk about actions, who will take the lead in some of those policies. So it's really important to be looking at this and updating this. I know that this becomes, what city management and council is looking forward. There's a lot of different ways that we can incorporate items. There's regulatory mechanisms that go in your zoning ordinance, your subdivision ordinance, making amendments to your map. There's CIP and funding mechanisms, and so there's some of that will get done within your capital improvement plan. We've listed some of the funding mechanisms. There continues to be more, thankfully. Right now, there continues to be more opportunities for funding mechanisms. Hazard mitigation is a big one that we're looking at right now with some of the mitigation funds, and BRIC funding, building resilient communities, funding that's out there. So there's actually some new things that we just started doing that I'll make sure pass on to you guys in terms of some opportunities for some funding. Normally, we don't get a lot of funding to be able to do codes and things like that, but within some of the BRIC funding right now, there is an opportunity to update codes within that, which is good because it gives us the opportunity to get some funding for planning type services. So, for you all in the room, it's going to be easier to flip through in the book, but for the purposes of those on Zoom, I just wanted to be able to show what that implementation plan looks like. It summarizes all the actions and recommendations in the plan, and short to midterm. There's some things that are ongoing. Pursuing funding, there's certain things that we're always going to be doing. Those are continual items, but we still put those in there so that they don't get lost. In terms of actions, and then like I said from the beginning, everything then rolls up to, those actions at the beginning, so we try to take a stab at who would be the responsible entity for those. So, there's several pages of all of those implementation items that really become your to-do list. So, with that, I will turn it over to you all. I know people are making notes or making some of these maybe personal notes, but if there's anything that you see you know, this is a draft document that we want to be able to incorporate everything that you have, in here, but we are looking for approval of the plan tonight. So, turn it back over to you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Wendy. So let's, we'll open it up to, I guess, Parks, when y'all, we'll start backwards and go forward. Parks, when y'all, kind of reviewed it, did you see omissions? You know, it was a working document. We know that we've put like some basketball goals, we've got our courts, we've gotten that approved. Some of those things are, so they're not on there. Like on the city side, we got CCN in a certain piece of property where you left that off the map, so now it's not included in that map, so I don't know if you want that information to be able to update. P&Z, if y'all saw anything else, I've got a list of them, just for clarification. So like page 6, you know, Northwood University's not even in existence anymore, so that should be dropped. And then what does ESRI mean?
That is Esri data.
Okay.
That's with where we're pulling some of the information from.
Okay, so does that need to be spelled out so we know what that,
Sure. Certainly can.
at least one time or whatever?
Sure.
And I guess I thought, like when I've done presentation, I thought our growth rate was higher than 2.7 or 2.9%. And so in one of your charts, it just says historically, year to year.
I think over time, it probably is around 3. I think, you know, more currently in the last 2 or 3 years, it's probably been more than 3. But I think over a long period of time, it is probably close to that.
So,
Yeah, so we are looking at it over time, and then, you know, it's always the trickiness of doing a plan that, you know, especially when it's been a year and a half in the making.
Sure.
You take that data almost 2 years ago, so, you know, you gotta kind of take it as snapshot in time when we start that. And then the growth rate in here is projected kind of using that trend line, you know, that we want to prepare for all sides of it, but that is a.
It says on page 13 that it's a conservative number, but it says that the conservative projection should be the minimum number of residents using and future utility capacity and demand, but just the minimum.
yeah, but, you know, I think we've been telling everybody that we're growing more than that, and so maybe we need to back off on our presentations if that's our. Yeah. And like, and I can refer to you a page on this, I'm sorry. And you may not know this because of the time frame. Like on page 43, you know, we had acquired some of this land out here by the lake on the other side by the highway. And so that's not necessarily, is that parks? I mean, that's page 43. So this, the dome, yeah, the dome property, 143, I'm sorry.
Oh, 143.
I'm sorry, 143. I said 43. So just updating the map that shows more appropriate of
This is what it said. So part of that would be parks, and part of it would be commercial.
yeah. What is,
Actually, none of it's parks yet, because EDC still owns it until they gift it or whatever. Yeah.
okay. Okay. What are we calling our new municipal center over there?
The government center.
Okay, so wherever you have City Hall or something over at Live Oak, if you'll change the wording to government center, because we, you know, whatever it is.
Say that again, anywhere it's referred to City Hall.
Like Live Oak, the new, called government center, we have a name for it specifically.
Okay,
Like this is the municipal center instead of city hall, that'll be the government center instead of city hall.
okay. I may coordinate with staff to make sure I get all those right. Okay.
Yeah. The other one that I think Parks kind of knows about, the Oaks development, down here, they actually have a green space that's parks, and so that's left out of the plan. What's, engineer, what's that called? The Oaks down there?
the Oaks development.
Yeah, and so it has green space that's gonna be parks, correct?
Right.
So to add that to the overall parks, included acreage or whatever.
Would you do that before
Well,
they dedicate it, or?
Yeah, I'd be hesitant to do that because I wouldn't want to skew data that actually hasn't happened yet. Or is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like they've got their zoning done and they've got some of their planning done.
And they're
but I
doing the
don't
construction
know-
right now.
I don't know, Ben, have they actually made the dedication of that park space yet?
No.
That'll come when they final plat after the infrastructure.
Yeah, after it's done, we'll take a deed from them.
Okay. Okay.
But
Not knowing, bringing it up.
Yeah,
The things
yeah,
that I
no,
saw.
I-
And part of my background, they, my voice, but you would be partnering with staff on all the upgrades, updates as well, right?
Yes, yes. And again, I want to be careful to make sure, because again, there are things that I'm sure that have probably happened over the last year. So things that are done that we can, make pretty simple updates to get it. We want it to be accurate, but at the same time, we already changed it and revised it again. It'll be something that happens tomorrow, and then, it is a living document. So we really want to be careful about making sure the contextual things are right. It's always, you're gonna adopt a document and then tomorrow something's gonna change. I mean, that's the whole purpose of a comprehensive plan, park plan. It is to be evolving, and so, I don't wanna get too caught up in too many, small details that we lose the big sight. Big picture, are we good with the direction? Are we capturing the big things? Because I think we'll always have something that changes tomorrow.
Well, yeah, I agree, but if it's already been done and it's already it should be in there
Yeah, if it's
appropriate.
done or incorrect,
Like
we
the
absolutely.
CCN
we'll
of
update it.
the Google land, and that was left off, so.
Okay, we'll get that updated. for
So-
sure. Those things, yes, for sure. We'll get
Okay.
them updated, so.
Yes, sir.
Calling Methodist Street Park a park is a real stretch. We're gonna increase the width of that thing by about 24 square feet, make it 4 lanes. That's really not a park, I don't think.
well, it's been called for 2 years, I don't know what else you call it. I don't disagree with you, that's just what it's been for.
Yeah, it's more green space, but I think that we don't have a designation for green space.
the trail. We might take a look at our developers for getting more green space, maybe little lakes. A lot of them use, retention pools, which they could deepen and make, small areas. And I think it would increase the value of their properties and they could raise a better price, by doing that. We used to require quite a bit out of developers, well, they still do for a sense of way. 342 land, I don't know what we're ever gonna do with that property. That looks to me like we ought to be selling that back to IDC and making it a commercial property, and by taking that funds and buying land more appropriate. The Cherry Creek Park, that park is isolated. There's just hardly no way you get to it. And we need to get a better access to that property than what we currently got. I really like the idea of a parks website. I think that'll help us, the citizens to better understand where parks are and what's available to them. It gets about all right now, parks and things like that.
And it'd be really good if you would come to one of our meetings and share with everything that you're spouting out there.
So that CCN, it was one of your slides that you put up, and, because I just wrote it down as you were talking. So I can't tell you what page it was, but it was a map when we talked about water concerns for future development, and left that off,
Okay,
so.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we're at in here.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know where the printed component it was, but it was a map that you had.
I saw it, and I don't know where it was either.
Anyone else?
A few questions, things, on page 34, 35, in the city thing, but some of the PAs have the exact same description. So why do you have, like, PA2, PA2, PA10, PA11 are all described the same?
One single, one small size.
Look at, so there's a general classification, but then there's some more descriptions on page 51, 52, 53 of each of those. And so some of those are other uses or things that there are some slight tweaks and clarifications in those further categories.
Okay.
There's one other thing that I think we need to do. Previously, we had a North Ellis County Council of Governments. Took in, most of the towns running from Glen Heights all the way down to Palmer. Todd mentioned some things back in our ETJ that we need to concentrate on in the future, like a plant or a sewer, because we're getting eaten alive by sewer costs. If we're gonna do that, we need to start right now on talking to those mayors and important people in those towns. That's how we got 664 expanded. We came together, and instead of having 14,000 or 15,000, we had about 30,000 people. 30,000 people had a lot more political push than 14. So,
But then would that be well, I would get consensus, would that be a recommendation that is added in the economic to create, do we have consensus on that?
meet every quarter or whenever they decide to it, but develop a priority list for projects that impact us, and again, brings us together politically.
So, part of that, discussion's made by staff right now, looking at the feasibility on trying to do that. And I think once they have that, more solidified, I think that was the goal to do that. So, we are in discussions with looking at that. That part of that's the engineering studies and stuff like that. But thanks for bringing that to light, so everybody can kind of be on the same page. But they are looking at that, more specifically. But well, one, the cities that are gonna be involved in that are Maypearl and Con Hill and, not Maypearl, Palmer, Ferris, and they probably don't have enough of the,
Resources.
yeah. So I think we're gonna have to take a lead and then invite them and get them to buy in on it. But
And we're, actually may have Waxahachie involved in some of it too. You know, the ex-mayor usually, and I have been talking with some of the folks there in Waxahachie about some different transportation things. I think the coalition is a good thing when you have something to talk about. When you're trying to put these plans forward, I think it's something that we need to do. I don't know that it's something that actually is a component of the comprehensive plan. It's more of a strategy, a policy as far as council, as we move forward.
You know, and I'm gonna bring this up too, Brian, since you're transportation. You know, and I think Ellis County is hamstringed by the North Texas Council of Government, because we have a vote that's split between Ellis County and Kaufman County. And so we don't get the funding like even your report talks about Collin County getting bunches of monies for those thoroughfares. So, you know, because y'all are statewide or national-wide consulting firm, how do you work that together to get, like, there's probably no way in Fireball for us to be able to take that 2377 across the old golf course and across 342 and across I-35 to connect with Stevenson, unless we had COGS funding to help make that thoroughfare.
And COG did do the funding and do an analysis and a study on it, but they have not funded the construction of it.
Yeah, so, but when we only have one vote to encourage that money to come here locally, how do we get that done? How do we,
We tried to make that one vote be the president of COG.
okay?
Well,
So,
I can put in a word to Michael for you if that would help.
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would say the best thing to do is keep it in the thoroughfare plan. Always leave it in the plan. Keep on coordinating. A lot of it right now, this is probably more of a long-term goal because of the cost. But there is a requirement for another east-west connector for sure. Loop 9 is going to do a lot in terms of providing east-west connectivity, but it's to the north of the city. So it actually may necessitate another east-west connection because of all the traffic it's going to generate. But the big thing for some of these projects, like Loop 9, it's been in the plan since the 1964, and it took that long to finally get built. But if you don't have it in the thoroughfare plan, you're definitely not getting any money. So keep it in the plan. Keep it, say, this is our long range goal. We want to wait and see what happens with Loop 9, but we know we're going to need another east-west connection. We know it's expensive, but it's something that we're going to need long term. And it is a struggle a little bit because you know, with COG, it's always the kind of the big four, if you will, that are always front and center for many things. But what we're seeing now is some of the, you know, the Ellis County, the Kaufmans, the Rockwalls, the Hunts, you know, that they're starting to get, they're having real needs in terms of basic connections that are actually becoming more important, because if you don't get those connections and you continue to grow, then you can be really in a bind. At least these, you know, the Terrence and the Dallases already have those connections. They're just trying to improve them. So that's, you know, that would be a selling point for me. But the big thing too is to show demand right now. And the only way to really do that in the COG is to get it in the thoroughfare plan so they can start putting it on their long range network. And when they do their modeling, it will show if it's a need. So putting it on the plan is the first step.
Okay, so is that the thoroughfare plan submitted to COGS? Do we?
Yes, once you do your thoroughfare plan, it's funny because I just had a meeting with Ellis County about 4 hours ago, and we're just talking about you know, looking at some things on the thoroughfare plan. So once these things are done, it's to pass along to the county, so it's included in the county thoroughfare plan. And what COG does is whenever it does its planning cycle, it goes to all the counties and it collects all the thoroughfare plans to make sure that those major connections are reflected on its transportation networks when it does its long range modeling. And when it does that, It helps bring up these connections to light, which ones are the most important. But if you don't have it on the thoroughfare plan, it's not going to be able to go up the chain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. You know, it's just,
It's, you know, funding is a battle. There's no question, you know, funding is a battle. Absolutely. But if you have it there, you have it on the plan, whenever these big infrastructure bills come through or other initiatives come through, there's opportunities.
And not only we're looking at Red Oak, but I mean, we're working on several different cities around the area. So like Brian mentioned, Hutt County, Rockwell County, some of those counties that, you know, we're looking pretty individualized at cities, but there's a lot of growth in the whole region. So we're now working on all the county thoroughfare plans to piece all those city pieces together. And, you know, and obviously we recognize that the other east-west connection is a big deal, but it will go to cost. They'll look at this when they put together their thoroughfare plans. They're looking at all these adoptive plans that all the city has. That's why it is very important. You know, all these different plans I know it's brutal and long and it takes time to do them, but it is very important because that's how all those things are happening.
And honestly, a lot of it is a lot about who you know. I mean, it just is. We have spent years developing relationships with Michael Morris at RCC. With Bill Hale, up until this year, he was one of our great friends. He was the Ellis County engineer for years, and then he was the Dallas District engineer for years, and then he was the head of TxDOT statewide for years. So we had good ears that would tend to work with us, and he retired this year. So a lot of that is going to have to be rebuilt. I know the Dallas District engineer is retiring as well, Mo Burke. So we're going to have to do some talking, meeting, losing.
so, did you have others?
I had a correction. On page 94, last two paragraphs look like they're page from above, just got duplicated. 171, you're adding up the deficits. I don't think that's matching, right? Little ones.
171.
It's negative 6.2 minus 1.1, that should be also the last column. And throughout chapter 5, the footer 5 is spelled out, whereas all the other chapters is a numeric 6. Middle column, it says, and use of EDC or IDC can use funds. So
Say that again.
right in the middle of the middle column, use of EDC or IDC can use.
Okay.
So we can use IDC money for
You can use IDC money for
technology.
infrastructure geared towards, well, you can towards parks, but for industrial and retail, you can't do it for residential and social parks.
And then on page 240, I first noticed it here, but you probably should go out and search throughout their document, but it says, it talks repeatedly about this 2010 plan. 2021.
Third line down, top left.
Okay.
And many others.
You know, okay, and, you know, so this was a minor update to the 2010 plan, so that's why there is some references, and the corridor plan is still in here, but it's.
Same thing on that center.
Okay.
And there might be a little bit,
paragraph.
Some places where you say 2010, I know it needs to be 2010, because you're talking about previous plans, but some places it doesn't. And then I have a general question, there's no mention of the library anywhere. Is it an activity, part of the Parks and Rec, or should it be incorporated somewhere?
Yeah, Gail, usually are you still there?
I am, but I didn't quite hear the comment.
There's no mention of the library anywhere.
Typically, that's not included in a parks plan, but I think we could either include it there or in the community livability. I think either place we could add it.
Yeah, I don't know if the best place is under Parks and Rec, but it seems like we should account for it somewhere.
Just account for it, okay. Okay?
Lee's gonna get with you and double check and make sure that growth rate, the one that we get in there is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. But it did that on the 20 census, that's more than.
So it was someplace in here wherever it talked about for funding and stuff like that, and it talked about how the general bonds or general bonds had to have voter election approval, but COs don't. So is there a formula of, and I assume, can we use CO bonds to fund the parks, some of the park projects? And do they follow the same guidelines as what we've done other COs on our funding rate and stuff like that? Or are they completely separate? And can you fund $27 million and let's build that big park out there? And dedicate, because I guess the way I read this thing, and I don't understand it completely, that is earmarked, then we don't have to go through voter approval to be able to do some of these park enhancements and stuff.
So typically with COs, a lot of it's based on what our current debt capacity is, so that's reviewed on a regular basis. But in smaller issues, typically we do COs. So like we've done recently, last 2 years, or last year I guess it was, we issued COs. A couple of years before that, we had the 19 issue and the 18 issue. Those were all, capital improvement type projects or government center, those types of projects. You could use them for anything. Use them, anything you can capitalize. For larger issues, so like if you were going to go out and want to build a $27 million park, you probably want to go out because it's going to increase the tax rate. We're going to have to go out, depending on the debt capacity, where we are at the time.
It depends on what it does to your rate, so.
Yeah,
So if it puts the total rate beyond that cap, then you would have to do it as a GO.
Okay. And I know we don't have control over IDC or EDC, but is there a way, because EDC is the one that helps do parks, is there a way that they can have a discussion to truly set X amount of that 1/2 of 1 cent to parks, and so we can start getting some of these things done, because we're, according to our community, they don't like us taking out bonds. They don't like school districts taking out bonds, but, and right here in our comprehensive plan, we say that schools are a big priority. We need to start figuring out how to get some of this stuff done and support those type of things. My opinion. But is there not a way that instead of Parks Board coming back and asking, EDC for some funds, can they not divide?
You know, that is the board that manages all the funds. They have to approve the budget every year, and they keep it set aside and say this amount. I mean, they could do it unofficially and say, this year we're gonna give you X $100,000, but then Parks can't just go spend it. It still has to come back if they have a plan that they wanna use. They still have to bring that back to the IDC or to the EDC, and that board has to actually approve the funding, and then it goes to council to approve.
So we need to be more active in deciding where we want that money and start writing those plans and submitting it to the IDC and EDC and say, hey, we need money to get this infrastructure for the Wi-Fi, citywide or whatever. And that 220, page 220, where it talked about broadband, what is that comment down on the bottom? What does that mean? What is Connect Nation? That's left off?
No, it's an initiative to fund broadband, and so it was just one of the things that we put in there. I mean, just looking at, because it became one of the things that we heard early on was to provide broadband. So that whole section is talking about options. I can explain that a little bit more.
Well, it just has Connected Nation, no period, no nothing.
Yeah,
I can cut something off.
It goes to the next page. Connected Nation Texas is a statewide initiative.
Oh, up
Top of
top.
the- Yeah, top of the next page.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I have a quick question as well. As we're moving forward now, by the end of the year, almost every manufacturer's gonna have EVs. I'm doing an event at the State Fair this week and next week on all electric trucks. Where are we as a city as far as, I know we have the Tesla Supercharger, but are we as a city looking to go out and get some of these companies like EVgo and them to come in to work with us as a city so that we can provide those charging spaces throughout the city, like maybe at Walmart or the grocery stores? I know that there are some shopping centers where companies come in and want to advertise, and they will put those in the cities for you.
We have not. I know we're working with
Tesla with them,
Tesla
correct,
over
right?
there, but it's not something that we've gone out.
Because
I mean, we're out
Thursday,
trying to get industry and restaurants. We have.
I work with,
Yeah.
Thursday, the fair's opening, and all the manufacturers are there, and the EV suppliers, so I can get that information and pass it on. But I know, like at the racetrack, the shopping center, they have free chargers for the city. They just want to be able to advertise on those, where you can do a quick charge.
COG does have a whole department that talks about EV and autonomous all emerging technologies. So I would, if you're looking at funding for that, they probably have a program to help you, or someone that could really, really help you and point you in the right direction. I would say NCT COG has a department that specializes in future technologies and autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles and all that. And they would be able to, they are very well aware of programs and funding opportunities to help you with charging stations and things like that. So I would definitely contact NCT COG to see what they have first, because at least they could point you to resources that could help if they could not provide them to you themselves.
So what you're talking about is Walmart, for example.
Right.
The EV charging company would come in and lease or ground lease or somehow be kind of like a kiosk space.
Correct.
Out in their parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that's something that we would have to look at. I mean, that would just be allowing it as a use within that zoning.
Well, the fair is opening, and we have media day with all the manufacturers and those people, so I can give that information. But as we move forward, if you look just going through Red Oak now, there's tons of EVs here. And I'm sure as people go to take their kids to the park, to the ball game, and we can provide a few of those or have it provided, it would make it even better.
Okay, on city property.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
So the proposed use that's being added, we've done a lot of technological advances, and while we, so we may just reference that. I think from the comp plan standpoint, from that big high level, time frame, it would be looking at the potential for those new uses. That would be the action.
And as he
And
said, with
And then that may
NCPA
be
cars,
something, yeah,
Right.
COG funding, that's out there, so
They
that
could-
would be just an action, and
Correct.
then you could prioritize.
So is this something that can be approved, like Scrivener's changes? Or they need to be done and, or,
So I think we let Bob and Wendy speak up here. I mean, what we
Yeah.
could do is they could go back and make the changes, staff could, review those, make sure they got the ones that you all talked about. And then we could put it back on, we still will have the council meeting tonight with the public hearing, we'll have the public hearing out of the way. And then we would just be able to put it on a regular council meeting for the actual approval.
Right.
If there's not too many, say if there's,
No, it sounds like, and I'd like to get everybody's feedback, but it sounds like there's a few minor things to adjust in here, but I haven't heard anything that is a directional change that, it's major, substantial things that would edit. So, typically, then it would be approval, with minor changes
With
to
changes.
staff, and then if you need to bring it back one more time, just to put it on the consent, we'll update these, if there's anything, that can, minor things that you catch, but I haven't heard anything that is substantial directional changes.
Bob, does that work for you?
Yeah, my only concern is if there's something that's changed and the public wants to comment at the public hearing, but if we're gonna have the public hearing tonight, whoever speaks, if anyone, they need to address the changes that the park board and the planning and zoning commission and the council have before they approve it. I hate to try to approve stuff on the run, because that's when mistakes get made.
We've got a pretty itemized list of everything that's been commented that's actual change in here. So what we can do is we'll present those back to you to say these are the things that have been changed in the draft.
As a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have one more static thing, but on page 136, if you look at it, you'll see.
136.
I do believe that, Todd, I do believe that the ordinance probably needs to come back to council. The council can go ahead and approve the plan and approve the Parks and Rec as with the suggested amendments, but I would want the ordinance to have a final document. We could put it on the October agenda for approval. We have the public hearing tonight.
Chapter 14. Let's do that now, and council, let me know if y'all see different, but assuming that they make these changes, y'all have any problem, just bringing, we'll go ahead and have public hearing tonight, bring it back at either this next regular council meeting or the following, whatever the next council meeting is, and approving it without them having to come back down and go through a whole presentation or
You don't want
anything.
me to come present again?
Yeah, we're on the page.
I know, you're out, you're done.
Does that work for all of you?
Works for me.
Yeah, it works for me. I don't see the need of having them come back if we already know the change.
Yeah, but that'll satisfy Bob's request, and
assuming that this is a public hearing, these comments
Sure.
will not be material.
Sure.
But, because I haven't heard anything material legally at all, so.
Yeah, if Todd, if P and Z would go ahead and approve it with the changes and let Wendy read those, and Parks approve their component with Wendy's comments, then you've got the recommendation, have the public hearing, close the public hearing, and bring back the ordinance for final adoption in October.
Mr. Parks, you want to go ahead and handle your section of it?
But we've got to open the public hearing first, right?
No. Theirs is not public hearing, but they have to take action on their.
They just give a recommendation.
Yeah.
But you may want,
Both Parks and, P and Z.
but you may, Wendy, do y'all want to read out those changes?
Yep, I can read those real quick. So we will, make changes to the following items. Obviously, we will update the adoption and take the draft off the page. We will correct the map that shows the CCN. Page 6, take off the, university that is no longer here, spell out Esri for clarity. Look at the growth rate and compare with what Lee has, could be possibly closer to 3%. But we'll double check with you on what the growth rate is. We'll clarify that the growth rate on page 13 is just the minimum. On page 43, I think this was a comment, but probably no action on page 43, that the land down by the lake is on the other side of on the highway. Oh, no, I'm sorry, this is an update. To update the map showing the current condition, change references of where we're referring to the Live Oak City Hall, the Government Center. Clarify if the Oaks development should be included in the park's overall acreage. There were some questions on transportation funding, but no action. On page 94, the last two paragraphs got duplicated. On page 171, check the deficits in acreage calculation. Check the footer to make sure that is consistent. There is a typo on the use of IDC funds on page 219. Clarify on page 240, the 2010 plan language. Add the mention of the library to the community livability section. Question on bonds, but I don't think there's action on that. Add a reference to the EV chargers related to technology and emerging technologies that might need to be added to the use table. And then a formatting revision on page 136.
There was another, the one, the missed, right? Okay.
One thing that we have been somewhat remiss in is, I know Scott Lindsay is on Zoom from P&Z, and do we have anybody else that are zooming in? We have any board members on Zoom, we need to make sure we
Ms. Wendy, I think they clarified that the Oaks, park doesn't need to be addressed because it's not entered the city yet, it's not been platted, so you can take that one off, whatever you read there.
Okay,
Sorry about that.
that's okay.
I do have a question on page 6. That's not Triumph Aerostructures any longer, it's Carbon.
yeah, Carbon.
That photo, the photos that were there, or just the?
Well, no, it just says major employer.
So,
Say that again.
spell it for us too.
It's not Triumph, it's QARBON, thank you.
And you also have a photo in there of Triumph.
Okay, so change Triumph to QARBON.
I think it's Park Aerospace.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Somewhere throughout this document, there's a photo of that building that has Triumph on there. So that needs to be
Yeah.
changed.
I think it was in industry.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, who? Oh, I apologize, sir, go ahead.
Oh, you, oh, give me a name.
No, no. Okay, yeah, Mr. Kelly.
That was the same thing about Carlisle.
Oh,
Yeah, page 227 has got the picture of Trump.
Okay. We'll add that to here.
all right, Mr. Lindsay, do you have any comments?
No, sir.
Thank you, and I apologize, I don't have my computer, and I didn't see that you were online, so I apologize.
No problem, sir.
All right, so according to the, well, let's do parks first. Ms. Lindsay, you want to address what y'all need to do?
I'll just make a motion, or, I'm sorry, I don't make a motion. I'll entertain a motion to accept this, 2022 comprehensive plan,
And then to make a
for the
recommendation.
park, recreation, and open space master plan with the corrections made,
And that would be a recommendation to council.
and it'll go as a recommendation to council. Joanne makes the motion. Maria seconds. All in favor? Aye, we're done. We're waiting.
Okay, Ms. Parks, you want to do yours?
Okay, I'm Derek Parks, Chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I want to make a correction. We do have, one member here, Scott Lindsay, he's on Zoom. I didn't catch that at first. But, to new business, consider recommending adoption of the regular 2022 comprehensive plan, parks, recreation, and open space master plan. Commission's gonna, motion, please.
I motion that we accepted the 22 comprehensive plan and park and recreation with the recommended corrections.
All in favor?
Here, Scott.
Aye.
I have, motion has been approved.
Okay. All right, so now we have to open a public hearing for this, and the time is 8:08, and we'll open this. Do they need to adjourn everything first? It doesn't. Okay.
We can all adjourn at once.
Okay, all right. We'll open the public hearing at 8:08. Is there anybody in the audience or online that wishes to speak about this comprehensive plan? Like someone from the city that, or from the community to jump up and say, thank you all for working on this. Been a year and a half in the works. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. So moved. Second. Those in favor?
Franklin, aye.
Aye.
That closes 5-0. All right, so we're not gonna take action on this. I think you have direction from where we need to have corrected, and then it'll come back to us. The only one other thing is, Do we not still have the 9-hole golf, frisbee golf?
Disc golf,
Disc golf, yes.
Yeah.
Cherry
Big cherry tree.
Well, but then to put an 18-hole, I'm not sure if we can justify the numbers that are attending or using that versus then keeping it on the plan. I think it's good to keep it on the plan because it'll help with Texas Parks and Wildlife. That was the one last comment that I forgot to pull off here, but, all right.
Bob, do we need to specifically table anything, or can we just not take action?
You can just not take action because you've had the public hearing. That takes care of any notice requirement. So you could put it on consent or for further public hearing if you chose. Not required. You've met the obligation under the statute.
All right. So, any other comments? One, I'd like to thank you all for your hard work, and, long hours and putting this together and coming back together and presenting it to us. I'd like to thank each of the committees and boards, for carving the time out, to be able to come and sit. This is, our guiding document for how we're going to kind of proceed over the next 5-6 years. We're gonna have to do this again. And staff, thank you a lot for, working with, Nichols?
Yes,
Freeze
Freeze Nichols.
All right.
Mayor, I thank you, and I thank everybody for having us. So, we appreciate the attention to everyone's detail, the hard work of the committee as well. So, we'll get you following your next meeting, and we'll get you updated.
Great. Why don't y'all adjourn your meetings first? Lindsay?
I'll make a motion, or I'll entertain a motion, to,
Adjourn.
make a motion to end the meeting. Joanne? Maria, second. All in favor? Close.
Good.
We're good.
Planning and Zoning Commission, can I have a recommendation to adjourn?
Second. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn at, 8:12 please. Councilman Drake, Councilman Franklin. Those in favor?
Franklin, aye.
Rick, aye.
All right.